Hello, and welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. I am so glad you're joining us. My name is Kim Menninger, and as a women's leadership coach and a lifelong sufferer of imposter syndrome, this topic is really important to me. I have heard so many imposter syndrome stories from the women around me. The crippling self-doubt, feelings of being a fraud, the fear of speaking up, the disconnect from others. I've also heard the inspiring ways in which women have managed these feelings, the ways in which they've stood up to self-doubt, sought out support, and come through on the other side. I started this podcast because I want to share these stories with you. Too many of us suffer in silence. We feel alone and ashamed of our feelings, which makes them even more powerful. I wanted to create a space where women could share their experiences and release the burden of what we often carry around as a deep, dark secret. I also wanted a place where everyone could hear from others and recognize, hey, I'm not alone. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and there are steps that I can take to rise above it. I hope that as you listen, you'll find support and comfort in what you hear. And if you're feeling brave and motivated to do so, I hope you'll someday share your story with us. Okay, so welcome. And before we jump in, I just want to remind listeners that we do make the option available to any of the people who are on the show to remain anonymous. So I want to just quickly invite you to introduce yourself and share whatever you feel comfortable sharing with the audience today.
Okay, so I am a 43-year-old, I guess mid-level executive, so in that director space, where I've worked for very large companies doing, very innovative and transformative processes with lots of employees and risks and things like that. And over the last 20 years, I've kind of worked from big and small in my industry. And, I've been doing this type of data management work for a very long time. So, there's a lot to that, but, in this industry, it's very well known and understood what needs to be done in order to comply with regulations and laws and, business needs across this this big scope of things. So, but basically, it's one of those types of things that it's not exciting to the average bear, when you're in companies that have major products or services that are just really exciting and transformative. This is kind of the work that protects the organization as they go through that process. So it's not always like the exciting thing at the table, but these are necessary things to kind of mitigate risk and be compliant with laws and regulations.
The kind of thing that they would miss if you were not there, right?
Yeah, and actually, even more so, it's something that it's almost like insurance. It's not insurance, but it's almost like, eventually something is going to happen in this space. And if you haven't laid the foundation and you haven't done the work to protect yourselves as an organization, then you end up with a lot of costs and potential litigations and expenses that could hurt the brand or reputation of your company.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for being here today. You and I chatted a little bit before we jumped on here about imposter syndrome, and you shared so perfectly the classic experience of imposter syndrome. And so now I want to just invite you to talk a little bit more with all of us about what imposter syndrome means to you, meaning, how has it affected you throughout your career? Anything that you would share about your experience with this issue?
Sure. So the way I identify with imposter syndrome, as I understand it, is just even recently I started in a new company, and even though I'm doing the same type of work that I've done in previous companies and have had success, and, I've never been laid off or fired, or, I've gotten good performance reviews and been reassured that it's valuable to the company and the work I was doing was good. For whatever reason, the transition to a new company has kind of stripped me of my confidence in myself. And I don't know why, but I think it's something where I feel like, do I actually belong here? Do I actually deserve this position? Am I the right person for this? Even though I've been doing it and have had success doing my particular role multiple times, for whatever reason, my brain just won't allow me to feel confident in myself, short of getting, people telling me that everything is great and wonderful. And, which doesn't always come in these kind of less visible positions. It's not the type of position where it's real easy to quantify progress and, show return on investments and things that are probably easier for other types of jobs to say, I've sold X amount of product. Well, mine doesn't really work that way. Can I tell you that I've reduced the risk of you having, a ton of fines or sanctions or something like that? Then I can't really quantify for an organization. So it makes it even harder for me when I see probably more visible work streams getting constant recognition and knowing that they're, the success for the company. And I just start unraveling, I think, and until I've been somewhere long enough that I feel secure again. If that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. And as we briefly chatted about before this, that trigger that comes with transitioning to something new is a really, really common one among those of us who struggle with imposter syndrome, myself included. It's when we're trying something new, when we're stepping outside of our comfort zones, when we're back in a situation where we don't have the full breadth of experience, we don't know everything, or at least feel like we've got this, right? That we start to have those self-doubts again. And like you said, you may have been doing similar work over the course of your career, but once you find yourself in that position of being new again, it all comes back, and it's a vicious cycle. You mentioned that until you're there long enough, right? So the nice thing, although it's hard for us to rationalize in the moment, is that we know that it does end, right? It's not a constant state. You can probably safely anticipate that over time you will get more and more comfortable in your role in your new organization, and these feelings will start to subside. Do you notice, if you look back, what the average time frame is to get to that point, or if there are specific resources or aspects of the culture that you belong to that allow you to ease that transition? Or is it more just waiting and getting through it?
It definitely seems like it takes me a year or two to really start kind of shaking off the everyday roller coaster. I think like I might have one day where I feel really empowered and confident in what I'm doing, and that I have all of the right things in place, and I'm going forward and I'm making progress. And then, the next day I could just experience my world completely different. Like, oh, I didn't have that all the right way, and I'm going in the wrong direction, or I've taken 10 steps back when I thought I should be here now. But I do tend to notice that, over the year mark or 2 years, there's definitely like a little bit more having bad days sprinkled throughout my year than there are to have this kind of constant, like every day I just don't know how I'm going to feel about the day or how I'm going to feel about myself in that first year or so.
And one of the other fascinating things about imposter syndrome is that you would think that when we find ourselves in these situations, especially for an extended period of time, that we would just want to alleviate that pain and take the quote unquote easy way out, right? So maybe it's just quitting or going back to a safer place, right? What gets you through that 1 to 2 year transition period? Are there particular things that you do to make it less stressful? Are there people that you lean on? Given that you've been through this before, is there anything that you have found to be effective in the past that you're looking to this time around for support?
I think my strategy is to try and learn as much as I can about the inner workings of the company, like the culture and, how do you get things done here? Where are the people who are going to roadblock you, and where are the people that are actually going to help you or are good to bounce off strategies or ideas, may even have some influence that could help maybe move something that I'm trying to do forward. I think the more that I build relationships in the organization, the better I feel, and then the more positive interactions I have with people, the more I get some of that confidence back. But those are, it's hard to kind of put them into a perfect timeline of, within a month I'll have met with everybody and feel good about where I'm going, that type of thing.
Sure. And I think what you're describing too are very common human traits where we are naturally wired to be anxious when it comes to change. We prefer predictability. We also are very much oriented towards a sense of belonging and wanting to fit in and wanting to feel a sense of community. And so when you're starting something new, often that sense of community is no longer there. And what you're describing about really focusing on building some of those positive relationships is a great strategy, because just all of those different pieces together of going through a change, not feeling like we have trusted people around us, doubting whether we can be successful can all compound to create even greater stress. And so something like spending time just getting to know who your allies are, getting to know how the system works so that it's not so uncertain, so that it's not so scary, can absolutely make a big difference.
Yeah, that it does seem to me that the uncertainty almost feeds the imposter syndrome. So it's that kind of, I don't know how to predict how people are going to react to stuff. I don't know, I don't know what I don't know most of the time. So that triggers me to start doubting myself, even though I do know what to do and how it should be done. And it's just funny to me that my common sense gets shaken with the triggers.
Yeah. And I think psychological safety is a big piece of that too, right? Because like you said, you can't predict what people are going to do. And it's hard to feel safe. It's hard to feel like, okay, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to make a mistake if you truly don't know what the consequences of that are.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know this is probably more of a personal thing. I don't know how much it overlaps with imposter syndrome, but I tend to catastrophize, right? So if I have a bad interaction or a bad meeting, and I haven't been here for 5 to 10 years, so I know I can take the brunt of any bad interaction. It tends to then I start kind of sewing a story in my mind that, oh, that didn't go well. Now they're gonna tell somebody else that they had this awful meeting with me and that I'm incompetent or something, or that I seemed this way, or I didn't talk articulately enough. And, they're just gonna start forming and getting opinions of me that I'm, we made a bad choice when we got her in here. Like,
yeah. Yes. And as a fellow catastrophizer, I know that experience all too well. And this is going to sound really silly, but one of the things that has helped me through that is to remind myself, people don't think about us as much as we think they do.
That's right.
It's so true, but there is an element of narcissism to anxiety when we think about these things, as we really do believe that, everyone's thinking about this and everybody is continuing to, obsess about how awful I was in that meeting when people are thinking about their own mistakes or ways in which they weren't happy about the way they showed up. And so it can be helpful sometimes to just keep that perspective of actually nobody really cares.
Yeah, I actually have been trying to tell myself that about tons of things. Like, this for me is a level 10 right now in terms of how I'm feeling, but probably for them was like a 2. They probably don't even know that I'm like stewing on this
Exactly.
as much as I am.
That's true. And I don't know about you, but my tendency is to always think about these things at 3:00 in the morning and losing sleep about it. And what I found was that it was helpful to just tell myself, Kim, literally no one else is thinking about this right now.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. The 3:00, everything I said the way I should have said it, or, everything I didn't do that I should have done, or, that's exactly what happens to me.
Yes, it's interesting because I have been looking lately at imposter syndrome as a bit of a mixed blessing, because on the one hand, there's a lot of pain that goes with it, as we're describing, right? This is a lot of stress. It's a lot of pain. At the same time, though, the experience is a good reminder to us that we're growing, right? We're not getting too comfortable. We're stretching ourselves, which at the end of the day, we truly don't want to plateau, right? We don't want to, especially in our 40s, right? We don't want to reach a point where we say, okay, I'm done challenging myself, right?
Right.
There's a lot of life that still lies ahead of us. And it's also something that keeps us being conscientious. I think if we're overconfident, then we may get complacent. We may not maintain the kind of quality standards that are important to us. And so there is a bit of a benefit that comes from this. And it's just a matter of managing the negative side effects enough so that we can experience this as a bit of, like I said, a mixed blessing, and not just this incredibly painful experience that we all tend to go through.
Right.
Is there anything else that you have, having moved around, you've been at more than one company, is there anything else that you have found about the work environment itself that has either made it more or less likely that you would experience some of these feelings of self-doubt? Like anything about either the style of your manager, how balanced the organization is from a gender perspective or diversity perspective, or just the culture more generally?
Yeah, I would definitely say my direct managers, my supervisors, make a huge difference to me on, how well I'm actually managing my own internal dialogue in this space. I've had managers who have been incredibly supportive, not necessarily micromanagers, but they've made it clear that you're free to do what you need to do. But if you get, stumped along the way, I'm here for you. We'll talk it through and bounce it off. And if you need me to join a meeting or put some heaviness behind it, I'll be there. And that has worked fantastic for me, because it reinforces the kind of, I am competent, I can do this, I am trusted. I know that if I hit a problem, I'm not going to be seen as, you should have had the answer to that, why are you bothering me? But that this person's going to help me actually, work through the problem to a solution, and we'll give it a try. And then the second part is that kind of culture. I've been in organizations where failing is not an option. They say they like to take calculated risks, which I always challenge, because it's like, well, a risk is a risk. So even if your calculations are off and the risk actually turns into a failure, then what? And I've seen organizations say calculated risk, and what they mean is you better get it right. So if that's the case, then you're going to, spend all your time trying to get it right. Whereas in a culture where it's like, it's okay if there's a mistake. It's okay if what you thought, in that strategy just didn't work out, or those timelines didn't work out because of X, Y, Z, and it's explainable. And, we support that, and we want people to try things, to, try new ways of doing things in order to get the end result.
Yeah, and there's that psychological safety piece again that I think is so important, and just that sense that we have to feel a certain amount of security to be able to be our full selves, to be able to try new things and not, like you said, always be thinking about avoiding failure, right? Because there's a big difference between being creative, trying new things, and instead being more deliberately risk averse because you're afraid of the consequences of failure.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think there's a certain amount of this experience that is our own to manage, right? Like that we are responsible for our own behaviors and how we seek out the resources that we need. There's also a certain element of responsibility on organizations. If they want to get the most from their people, it really behooves them to create an environment where people aren't afraid, where people can trust and fail and get back up again. So I think what you're saying makes perfect sense about really feeling more comfortable and less self-doubt in an environment where that's okay.
Right.
I always like to ask this question. If imposter syndrome were not an issue for you and you had 100% confidence 100% of the time, what would be different for you? Is there anything that you would do or would not do?
I think I would give myself more permission to, not wait for everything to be perfect in what I'm doing. So if I'm creating, whether it's content or some deliverable of some sort, that it's not, 100%. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be good enough to start moving forward and say that work stream or something of that nature. And I think what I do to myself is sometimes analysis paralysis, trying to make sure that when I go in and I present something, or this is, the work stream I'm working on, that it's already been thought out from every single angle, tried and tested and 100%, so that there will be no failure. It just is. There's nothing you could challenge about it, that I did it all and I figured it all out. And, but the way the world has, in my view, changed, in the last 10 years or so, is that, people are looking for the quickest way to point B, not always the best way. So you have to allow yourself to let go of perfection. And even sometimes what are best practices. And I think I would be willing to look more, be more flexible and probably move things forward a lot quicker, because I'd have confidence in that it doesn't have to be perfect and I know what I'm doing. And as long as I'm in a certain guardrails, that what I'm doing is going to work anyways. And I'd have more confidence in that than saying I have to stick to kind of the way I understand how to do things, because that has been successful to me in the past.
You can't see me, but I am nodding my head vigorously right now. And I'm sure everybody listening is too, because that is such a common one for so many of us, that wanting to make everything perfect. And like you said, balancing that with the need for efficiency. And it's hard to know what is good enough, right? Because we have such high standards for ourselves and our work that anything less than perfection often feels like we're compromising on quality. And really there is a lower bar than we think there is. Right?
Yeah, a lot lower most of the time than I'm used to.
Yeah, I think the bar that other people have for us is far lower than the one that we have for ourselves.
Right, absolutely.
So my final question today is, what motivated you to want to tell your story today? What are you hoping that people will take away from it?
I think that for me, I find comfort in knowing that other people are going through or feeling the same way that I feel, even though it doesn't make sense. Like my husband, for example, we both relocated, and so we both started jobs at the same time. And I look at him and I think he's, obviously intelligent and capable and all of those things. And I think he, would be his emotional intelligence is off the charts and all this stuff, and then yet he's struggling with the same feeling. And I think I look at him going, that's just silly. You're great. You're going to be fine. And he's getting in his own way with these thoughts. And same for me. And I thought, well, even just us talking about it and then me finding out about you in this topic made me feel better. Just that, like, hang on a second, is this real or is this imposter syndrome? You know? And if other people can relate or identify with anything that I've said today, then there's some comfort in knowing that you're not alone in that journey.
Absolutely. And that is exactly why we're having this conversation today, because I think that too many of us suffer in silence. It doesn't feel safe to say these things out loud.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You don't even want anyone to see that the meeting says imposter syndrome. Because
right.
Oh, so you're an imposter, are you? You know, like, no, I just feel bad. And then I don't want to expose all my vulnerabilities to everybody. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I am sure that everybody listening is getting a lot from this conversation. I so appreciate your taking the time today to talk with me. And I hope that you are finding that the transition is nearing its end and that you reach that that state of confidence more quickly. And thanks again for being here.
Thanks for speaking with me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it with other women who can benefit from this conversation. Before we go, I want to share some additional resources with you. If you struggle with imposter syndrome and you want to manage it more effectively, I invite you to join my free Imposter Syndrome online challenge. Every day for 7 days, you'll get an email with self-reflection questions and exercises to help you better understand your own experience with imposter syndrome and how to navigate it more effectively. To join the free challenge, visit executivecareersuccess.com/imposter-syndrome-challenge. When you sign up, you'll immediately receive your first message. Also, if you're interested in joining a community of women who engage in candid conversations that generally aren't happening elsewhere, I invite you to join my Leading Women discussion group. On the first and third Thursday of every month at 12 p.m. Eastern, we meet virtually over Zoom to talk about questions or challenges related to career management, leadership development, and any other relevant topics such as imposter syndrome and confidence. It's always a great discussion with a great group of women. If you want to check it out, you're welcome to be my guest on a future call. Just reach out to me at kim@executivecareersuccess.com and I will share the call details with you. And if you want to join my newsletter to receive tips, insights, and updates, text Leading Women, all one word, to 66866. Finally, consider telling us your story. Contact me to learn more about how you can be a guest on the Impostor Syndrome Files. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.